The Iowa running back room is as deep as it's been in a decade in Iowa City. Will they make an impact in 2024? Plus, Scott Dochterman joins us talking Hawkeyes today. Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Men, this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. I'm Trent Condon. Glad to have you aboard with us here today as we talk Hawkeyes with you. Your team every day on the Locked On Network. A busy one for you today as we talk about the deep running back position and the impact for the offense in 2024 and a deep stable of backs for the Hawkeyes coming up this season. We also talk with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic, and the bracket is out for Spencer Lee as he chases gold in the Olympics. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. As we continue our conversation and our deep dives of this Iowa football team today, we take a look at the running back position, a deep and talented running back stable, I believe, as good as Iowa's had in a decade plus when you're talking about the sheer volume of ball carriers and guys that I think are going to be impactful college football players. Now, we also know the running back spot is not a place where you're going to have 6, 7, 8 guys. This is not the offensive line, defensive line, even the defensive backfield. You're talking about 3, maybe 4 guys throughout the course of the year outside of injuries that are going to happen. And then I know there's plenty of you out there that say, oh, don't even talk about a deep running back position because they remember 20 years ago, 2004, when it was down to Sam Brownlee for a while. You had Aaron Mickens that had to play running back a little bit, a fullback. It got ugly. And I know the angry Iowa running back hating God, many people believe, I don't worry about voodoo. I don't believe in that crap. It's not true. It's not going to happen. Well, it could happen, but it's not because of some mythical being out there at the running back position. I love the depth of this position and the potential upside for it. So a year ago, we saw strides out of the running game that we hadn't seen in a couple of seasons. And though the offense obviously did not take the step forward that anybody anticipated, it was overall one of those years that was left you saying, maybe they've started to figure out this run game a little bit more. Iowa has had to evolve what they've done offensively and what they've done for the last 26 years under Kirk Ferentz because of the rule change. And every day, as you know, I've mentioned this plenty of times before, but it bears repeating because it's incredibly important. The rule change that was implemented in college football 6, 7 years ago now really neutered what Iowa does in the running game with the zone blocking scheme. And the basic tenets of it is cut blocking was not allowed anymore. And cut blocking, even inside the box, was completely negated by the rule change. Kirk Ferentz has complained about it. He has let his thought be known about what he thinks of the rule, and he doesn't like it, to put it mildly. However, Iowa didn't evolve with it. And that led to many of the issues that we've seen and obviously come to a forefront over these last 2.5 seasons of offensive football and just how ugly it has been for the Iowa offense. And a big reason for that is the outside zone play, which was a basic tenet of what they did. You just can't do it anymore. We've talked about this with Leshon Williams, Leshon Daniels, got the other Leshon in front of me, last season during football season. And we talked a lot about that impact and what it meant, the system that he was able to play in, the system a decade ago that Iowa went through and what it changed into. And you can't play at the same level that you once did and run the football at the same kind of level. So you have that component and what it's changed into. Last year, Iowa moved away from the traditional tenets of that zone blocking scheme and implemented more gap blocking, more counter plays, those types of things, and using some movement. We've seen the jet sweep that has been at least a small part of the playbook, and that has helped. Scott Dochterman, who will join us a little bit later on, he's talked about those numbers in the past that he has and just how much better the Iowa offense has been when they've implemented that zone look, the jet sweep look into it. But that aside, so that's the basic tenets of things. So let's talk about the dudes here. Let's talk about the guys and what we anticipate we're going to see coming up this season. At the top of the depth chart is Leshon Williams, a senior now after 3 years with the Hawkeyes, played a little bit as a freshman, had 21 carries that year, then was part of the group in 2022. 413 yards, averaged 3.5 yards a carry. and a couple of touchdowns. And then last season, his best season in a Hawkeye uniform, as he runs for 821 yards, averaged 4.8 yards per carry, and had a touchdown. That one touchdown of the year, though, it was a monster as Wisconsin took the L in that one. Leshon had the big play. The offense didn't do much outside of that, but that was enough to beat the Badgers last season in his only touchdown of the year. Leshon Williams is a solid back, a nice, solid Big Ten back. He is not an elite guy. He's not a guy that is going to be an NFL draft pick, or certainly not anything in the first 2 days of the NFL draft. That's not what he is, but he is solid. He's dependable. He is exactly what you're looking for when you're building your stable of running backs. And he's going to get the first crack at things. The most talented guy on this roster, at least of the guys that are ready to play right now, I still believe in Kaleb Johnson. Last year was a huge disappointment. After he thrust onto the scene in 2022 as a true freshman, ran for nearly 800 yards that year, averaged 5.2 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns in that freshman campaign. It was a step back last season. Under 500 yards rushing, down to 4 yards per carry and just 3 touchdowns a year ago. Raw talent, size, speed combination. There's nobody better right now on this Iowa football roster than Kaleb Johnson. Continue to hear, though, about Kaleb Johnson is he's got to get everything in order. It's never been a question about talent with Kaleb Johnson. It's about doing all the things that are anticipated to do to be an Iowa football player. Bit of the doghouse, perhaps you can use that terminology. We know when he is right. When the head is screwed on, he's doing everything that is asked of him. There's not a more talented guy in that running back room. Is he willing to do that, though? Still remains a question. I hope he figures it out, because I don't believe that we've seen this kind of combination of power and speed since a healthy Jermel Lewis some 20 years ago. That's how good I believe Kaleb Johnson can be. And for you old timers like myself that remember Jermel, you know before his injuries just what a dynamic talent he was. But that is not alone, and that's what leads to the depth of this position for Iowa football this year. You look at Jazion Patterson, had a couple of big plays a year ago, the biggest one against Iowa State. He's back for another season. He's likely the number 4 running back. The reason he's number 4 is we continue to hear about the emergence of Kamari Moulton, another guy that played last year as a freshman, a little bit smaller, 5'9", 197 pounds, but Moulton, a name that has come up multiple times talking to some people throughout the spring and summer and here into August camp. Moulton's name is going to be a guy that you're just going to be, it's hard for them to keep him off the field, is what I continue to hear about Moulton. And then you go deeper into that. We've already seen the position change that has happened for Terrell Washington Jr. as he's moved over playing more slot receiver. Now, if they got in a pinch, absolutely, he could come back. If the angry Iowa running back hating God comes back again, yes, you could move him back there, but he's getting a lot of work at the slot receiver. You bring in the freshman on top of it coming in this year. Xavier Williams makes his way in from Indianapolis. He's your power back. He is your big power, dependable guy. Think of some of the power backs of the past. That's what you're getting with Xavier Williams. And then another dynamic piece that is going to be interesting to see what they do with him is Brevin Dahl. Now, there's already some talk, and yes, I can tell you that Brevin Dahl has been doing some practice at the wide receiver position, and something that I thought always made sense after the hire of Tim Lester, hearing what they were doing with TJ Washington, doing the same thing with Brevin Dahl. Speed, if you looked at track times and you saw what he did in his high school career, you know he has speed to burn. If you watched him on the football field, you definitely know that that speed translates to the football field. Brevin Dahl obviously had that at ADM Adel. He is a gadget piece. He has an opportunity to maybe be that slot kind of guy. Do they use him in the jet sweep motion? Is that something that makes sense? It's something I've said for a long time. I thought made a whole lot of sense for Brevin Dahl, and he's getting some reps over there right now. So he's trying to figure out both the playbook at the running back position as a true freshman, and also learning now a second position at running back. The upside is dynamic there, and this running back room, it is deep, it is talented, has a chance to be special. It'll be special at that offensive line, as we talked about in the past, takes a step forward. And we continue here, Locked On Hawkeyes, and we are joined by Scott Dochterman from The Athletic, talking Iowa football camp, some of his questions in an article a week ago, talking about some of the big questions that still remain for this Iowa football team. Doc, coming up next as we continue, this is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually goes down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I love the opportunity right up until that first pitch, right up until kickoff, an opportunity to get those tickets and save. Last-minute deals, save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy theater, and a whole lot more. And the all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows you the total up front. No more surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That'll get you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We continue with you here, Locked On Hawkeyes, and we are joined by Scott Dochterman from The Athletic.
Doc, I read your piece at The Athletic, sometime last week, and I think you had all the salient points when you were referring to the 5 position groups that need to take a step forward for the Hawks. Trent and I both feel that this has a chance to be, a typical, and I say typical, 10-2. I mean, how many teams would kill for a typical 10-2 type of record? But there's a chance that this is a special season, Doc, and I think you're spot on, especially when it comes to the offense and the punter too, because you had such a weapon, or Iowa fans and Iowa had such a weapon in Torrey Taylor. But let's start with the quarterback position, Doc. Obviously, health is on everybody's mind when it comes to Cade McNamara.
It is the most important position on the field, as we've seen, and a lot of that has to deal with what we've seen it when it's average or above average, and then when it's way below average, which has been the last few years. And I think first you start with health, as you said. Cade McNamara is the key to this offense, and it's a new offense, and they're going to have to rely on not only him playing catch up and learning the intricacies and nuance of it, but also being able to execute it and put it in a position to where it's digestible for his teammates. And I think that's going to be really impactful for Iowa, just to be competitive on that side of the ball. But the good thing is that they have a competitive situation behind him with Brendan Sullivan, who's actually played football at the Big Ten. And then people could say, well, so did Deacon Hill, but I kind of think that Brendan Sullivan's a little bit better. And I think he could handle this offense a little bit better. So if there is a situation where either Cade is not healthy or is not executing in a high level, I think they can make that adjustment, because when you start to look at some of the comparisons of the Nate Stanley era versus the last 3 or 4 years, you're going from 68 touchdowns in 3 years to 28 the last 3 years. That's 40 touchdown pass difference. And then you look at the red zone. I mean, 47 touchdowns in the red zone for Nate Stanley with 1 interception. And then the last few years, it's been like 8 and 6.
It's just bananas. And look what they've done.
Yeah.
Right. Despite that.
Doc, I have a theory. I don't know if I've thrown it by you before, but we've seen the last couple of seasons, as great as the Iowa defense is, they have not had the same sheer volume of big impact plays, either getting to the quarterback or, more importantly, forcing turnovers at the same level we saw before. My theory behind it is it's because offenses know that they don't have to do anything difficult against the Iowa defense, because in turn, the Iowa offense wasn't going to do anything. If you have just a competent offense this year, I think it has a chance to make this Iowa defense, maybe they'll give up a few more yards and a few more plays. However, those turnovers could come back this season. Could you see it that way?
For sure, Trent, I think that's a really good point, because when you look at those teams, they're saying to themselves, let's not make a mistake. They're playing risk-averse football too, because they know the only way Iowa can really beat them decisively is for us to make mistakes, whether it is an Illinois or a Northwestern or whatever. So they play everything really close to its best and think the same way Iowa does, which is don't make any mistakes. We'll punt away the ball. Yes, their defense is really good. We've seen what they're able to do with it. So let's just not give them any opportunities to do that. And we'll hold them on offense because they can't move more than a couple feet anyway.
Right.
And so that's really been why they haven't had a lot of turnovers last few years. And I know that's something that Phil Parker really harped on during the spring with them, is to take the ball away with more regularity. But what we saw a couple of years ago, even like 2021, when they had 25 interceptions, was that they got ahead of teams on a lot of those games, and they were passing from behind or different situations, and that's why they were able to take advantage of it. That can happen again if Iowa puts itself in a position where other teams have to come back.
I would be nice if their receivers were able to take a big step forward. We know that obviously the tight ends have carried them in the last few years, but there's a couple of guys, Doc, that are down the depth chart or behind somebody on the depth chart. I guess where I'm going is Jared Bowie being one of those guys that seems to have some buzz around him. Terrell Washington Jr. as well. Looks like he's got some skills, and they're going to try and find a role for him because of his athleticism on the field. But how about some of the young guys at the receiver position that we really don't know much about, at least at this point?
We'll see him more in person this weekend, but Jared Bowie is one that Kirk has really talked up and thinks he's got a chance to be a really good story. They like the way he's performed, and that's why he's listed on the one line in the depth chart going into the fall. And that doesn't mean he's going to be there for sure, but it means that he's very much competitive for that spot, and they really like him. And likewise, he brought up Dayton Howard as somebody who really had a great end of his spring. So he's also in that position. So if you can get two bigger wideouts that can stretch the field, win one-on-one matchups, and you could throw one-on-one, passes to them down the field, I think you've got a situation where you're in a much better spot than you were. And then, some of the other guys, you want one or two of the young guys to emerge as the least rotational pieces. I mean, I think Kaleb Brown is a competent receiver, and he'll be, when he's in there. Seth Anderson, I expect to take a step forward. We don't know anything about Jacob Gill, really. He played a little bit at Northwestern, but was it just out of necessity, or was he good? I mean, Caden Legion, I think, is somebody that they like a lot, but he's still a walk-on. You still have to cut it down that way. And so there's a lot of question marks there. I think it's got the biggest question mark on the team as far as whether or not they could be competent or just simply guys on the field running around.
We know Luke Lachey, if healthy, is one of the best tight ends in the country, if not the best tight end in the country. He's got that kind of talent. However, we saw a little bit of Addison Ostrenga last year. I think you're excited about his upside, his future. What else behind them, though, when you look at some of the young names in there? Tight end, such an important position. Tim Lester said it's going to be multiple tight ends that they're going to be using over the course of the season. After that top two, who do you like for this season?
I think they've got a lot of talent behind them. And, last year we saw that Zach Ortworth got some really good, important reps. He also was put in a position, it was against Wisconsin.
That play call.
And he was, it was a 4th and 1, and you've got him, going head to head with a senior from Wisconsin. Good luck with that. And so, he got a baptism by fire. I think he's going to be in a position. I think Johnny Pascuzzi is going to be in there. And I wouldn't completely count out Gavin Hoffman from making some strides and maybe getting himself on the field, whether that's on special teams like kickoff return and then an occasional tight end spot. But there's a lot to like there. Every year we kind of go into it going, okay, is the next one going to be in this position? And I think Addison Ostrenga has proven himself to be probably upper level of the Big Ten, upper half among the starters. And then Luke Lachey, when healthy, is going to be one of the 2 or 3 best, not only in the tight end, but maybe in the country. So they're going to play a lot of 12 personnel, and they can do that in this offense. And I think it's rightly so, because if you've got a combination like that, you want to lean into it.
Doc, you were in Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days. Where I want to go with you is we look at the Hawkeye schedule. They'll open Big Ten play by going to Minnesota. What do you know about the Gophers? Is this a team that's going to sneak up on some people? Are they expecting they'd be happy with 6 wins this year? Where are the Gophers under Fleck? I guess he's recruiting pretty well, which has got that going for him. Kalkmanis is now starting at Rutgers. So what do you know about the Gophers?
This is going to be a really fascinating matchup, because I think they are capable of being a decent team, because when you look at some of the key players, key spots, especially on offense, they have players that can match that. I think Daniel Jackson may be the best player that we just don't hear much about in the Big Ten at wide receiver. He was second team All Big Ten. Very much an NFL caliber receiver. He's as good he's in that Bateman and Tyler Johnson category.
Wow.
As far as being a very good receiver, probably a top 150 kind of guy in the NFL. And then at quarterback, Max Brosmer is fascinating to me. You know, he was the AFCA first team All-American FCS quarterback last year, 29 touchdowns at New Hampshire, 3,000 yards. They really like the way he's going to grasp that offense. And then, you know, Arante Ursery at left tackle is going to be one of the best players at his position in the country. And Darius Taylor, if he wasn't hurt, would have been a really, it would have had great numbers last year as a freshman running back. So when you've got those pieces, you've got the opportunity to be successful. Now, how everybody else comes together, I don't know. They do have a very difficult schedule. I think they, I can see them getting to 6-6 and being a better 6-6 team than what their schedule says. But I also could see them going 4-8 just because there's some games that can go either way. But that said, that Saturday, it's going to probably be a Saturday night game. I've been told it's basically, it's going to happen.
Oh, really?
It'll be Saturday night in Minneapolis, and I expect that to be rocking, and I expect it to be highly competitive because I know Floyd of Rosedale's at stake.
Best trophy in college football for my money.
And the grain belt will be flowing for that one.
Well,
Doc, we'll get you out on this, not just the Hawkeyes for you now at The Athletic. It is the Big Ten and college football as a whole. In our final minute or so, what do we need to know about the notice of allegations for Michigan? Sherrone Moore, obviously now the head coach there. What do we need to know about this?
Well, there's so much. I think that you want to see how does the NCAA handle this. I mean, will Michigan have to vacate its championship? I mean, that's the ultimate big question. I don't know if that's going to happen, but you got to be cognizant that sometimes things like that happen. I think you also have to look at things like, will Sherrone Moore have a suspension? There was the deleted text. Now, what was been reported today is that the deleted texts didn't have anything to do with it. They're more of vulgar nature, and I can understand that sometimes they send memes that I wouldn't want anybody else to some of my high school friends that I wouldn't want out there. So there's some things like that. But I do think it's going to be really interesting to see how the NCAA tries to crack down on Michigan for this, and we know that the scandal that happened, it did impact Iowa significantly in a couple of games, but I also think that the changes that were made with the headset, and I think were expedited because of that scandal. So then ultimately, it'll be interesting to see how that comes to fruition. How that impacts the game.
Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Doc, what have you got coming up this week at The Athletic?
Couple of things. One, I'm working on today for tomorrow about style of play in the Big Ten West and how it's going to have to adapt for those teams going to a bigger Big Ten. And then later on, I'm working on a kind of a jamboree, if you will, with our SEC writer as to, who would win in these matchups, but hypothetically, SEC versus Big Ten. And then finally putting together for early next week, the ultimate Big Ten road trip, which is each week you only get to pick a site once, and how everything will come together. I think that's looking at Monday. So that, and then we got, I'll be in Iowa City doing media day and the practice too. So it'll be a busy week.
Indeed it is. It's here. Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Doc, as always, thank you. Scott Dochterman joins us every Monday, one of our regular guests. Doc, have a good week. Thank you, buddy.
Yep. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Scott Dochterman, always a great conversation with Doc. Appreciate his time and talking some Iowa football and the Big Ten as a whole. You can find his work over at The Athletic. We continue, and we mentioned yesterday Spencer Lee's path to the gold medal got a little bit easier. Not going to be easy in the 16-man field, but the bracket is out. How does it shape up for Spencer Lee? We'll do that as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football, expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is now available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Spencer Lee got his draw as he chases Olympic gold. It will start up at 4:39, I believe was the exact time, Central Time, for his first match, as he will go up against a wrestler from China, Zhu, that he saw semi-recently, a couple of months back. Now, he fell behind in that match, 6-1, came back and really controlled things afterwards. The Spencer Lee that we saw even 3 months ago, compared to the guy that we see now, I think that is going to be one of the more compelling parts of these matches here and his opportunity as he looks to chase down a gold medal. The path got a little bit easier when you lose a world champion, as it happened with the knee injury sustained a couple of weeks ago, I guess it was, and just announced the other day. It opens up the path, but this thing's not going to be easy. But Spencer Lee, to think this is a guy that has not lost a freestyle contested match since 2015. He does not have a lot of international experience because of the knee injuries that Spencer Lee has sustained that has kept him away from more competition that he would normally have at this point in his career, 25 years old, on the international scene. As great as he was as a folk style wrestler, as amazing as he was in his years in an Iowa Hawkeye singlet, you also have to remember where his bread was buttered, where people considered him one of the all-time greats. And he's that as a folk style wrestler, and what he did at Iowa in his prep career, freestyle, people say, is at another level. I'm excited for it. He will have to wrestle 3 matches on Thursday in order to punch his ticket to the gold medal match. He'll have to obviously win all 3 to do that. Path is set. Spencer Lee, best of luck from everybody here. Myself, Trent Condon, and everybody I know out there in Hawkeye land. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to more Iowa football talk with you here today and throughout the week on Locked On Hawkeyes. We got you covered each and every day on the Hawkeye front. And as always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Make sure you go check out Locked On College Football Podcast with the NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors that are out there. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for the exciting season coming up on the football field. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description of this show, so you don't need to search. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, also one other mention, want to pass that along and have a couple of times for people that don't know, maybe just listen to the podcast here on the Hawkeye front. I host a daily sports radio show in Des Moines on 106.3 KXNO, and it's on in the past, it was a different time, but we have shifted a little bit and changed things around. So now my show is on from noon until 2 each weekday. Myself, joined by Ken Miller. We've been on the radio for a number of years together. As I just realized, I'm going into now my 21st year on the radio talking sports. But shows from 12 to noon on KXNO in Des Moines. But also now we're going statewide. So you can catch our show each weekday, again, from noon until 2 in Sioux City. You can find us there on 620, the AM sports station in Sioux City. Also find us on 95.7 FM in Cedar Rapids, 800 KXIC in Iowa City. To everybody in the Iowa City listening audience and over in the Quad Cities as well. So a lot of different places you can find us across the state. Really excited about that launch. And if you're looking to hear a little bit more Hawkeye talk, and we got you covered there. We talk a lot of sports, though. That is on noon until 2 statewide across the landscape, and very happy and excited about that as we get ready for football season. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Go Hawks.